Hi there. Yes, that was all true. Thanks for showing up for the first keynote. My short, punchy, focused first keynote. I was asked by the organizers to talk about last year, or maybe the forthcoming year. This wasn't entirely clear. I mean, maybe 2007 or maybe 2008, because, I'm a science fiction writer and a futurist, and I've been known to do things like that in the past. And I wanted to do this in a really short, focused, punchy way, because I think, that's very much in the lift spirit. So, what's the punchiest possible thing you could say about the past year? It's kind of like, that's the way it was, now get after it. And as for predicting the future, which is something I've also been known to do, the basic reason to do that is motivational. I mean, frankly, it's morale boosting. That's why you do it. The main reason people prosper is because they're willing to get out of bed. Showing up is 90% of the job, really. And it's hardly ever because they have some kind of brilliant, lucid, accurate idea of what the year holds for them. I mean, that just doesn't happen. Showing up, persisting, doing it, getting up out of bed, that's what really counts. And what we want to be told by futurists are the things that motivate us to get out of bed in the morning. Like, wow, this is going to be a really crucial year, and these are revolutionary times, and everything hinges on the decisions that we make this month, and only the bold deserve the fair, and, great fortunes are waiting, and so forth. And I know how to do that, really, because I've seen it done like maybe 100 times. But this is a lift audience. I mean, this is not a Silicon Valley event. There are Europeans here. Europeans being, people who have some sense of historical continuity and can actually see a little farther than like just last year, just next year, and really, frankly, for all kinds of very obvious reasons, 2008 is not going to be a pivotal, revolutionary year. It's not impossible that something really important will happen in 2008, but really, that's just not very plausible. It's a crap year, 2008. We've got this economic downturn waiting. Everybody knows it's coming. It's going to be hard to raise capital, do anything vital. It's an election year in the USA. They're going to be extremely preoccupied. China's having an Olympics, which is nice, but they're going to be trying to do at least some of their incredible heaps of dirty laundry during 2008. And India's doing great, but India's completely surrounded by crazy mujahideen lunatics. They've kind of got their hands full. And Europe is doing pretty well, but Europe tends to do things slowly. I mean, thoroughly, but slowly. Like a python, like a vast European python that eats 5 or 10 countries at a time, and then digests them slowly but thoroughly. And the worst problem that the world has right now, which is global warming, is like a 200-year-old problem. It's a slow problem. It's a problem we can say with certainty that our great-grandchildren will worry about. It's not going to be solved in 2008. That is not an issue. I mean, global warming is a way of life. And even in the tech world, which I love for its fast pace, its boldness, its recklessness, is it really exciting to watch Microsoft eat Yahoo? I mean, be frank with me here. Is there anybody, even inside Microsoft or inside Yahoo, who really thinks that's the way forward? Is that an innovation? No, that's not an innovation. That is a profoundly retrograde move. That's an aging monopoly shoring up its position by feeding on the weak. Microsoft is boring. I mean, Gates left, it was so boring. Gates would rather cure malaria, which is like 15 different kinds of impossible, rather than pretend that Microsoft is the road ahead. It's that bad. So, given that these are the facts on the ground, and they are, I wanted to offer you something that was really focused and specific. A piece of futuristic prophecy, just like a flat-out prediction with like facts and figures that as Europeans, I'm certain you can use in 2008. Something you can take from Lyft that will give you a valuable insight and genuinely brighten your life. Really punchy, focused. So let me explain to you how you can deal with a phenomenon that you are certain to be confronting during the entirety of 2008. It is something that came out of nowhere. And it achieved fantastic press attention. And it is defining the very character of our times, especially in Europe. And you've already seen a lot of it, more than you ever wanted to see, more than you expected to see. And you're going to see more and more and more of it. And it's a practical certainty that you'll see it. And if you're not prepared for this, if you don't have the proper analytical tools, you will be overwhelmed by it, confused, sickened, bewildered. Whereas, if you do understand what's going on, with an ability to anticipate developments there, you will be like an American who's been taught the rules of soccer. You'll probably still won't like it very much, but you'll understand why it matters to people, and you'll be able to put it into some useful perspective and get on with your own life. And as I'm sure you have guessed, yes, I am referring to Carla Bruni. Madame Carla Sarkozy, the First Lady of France. And you may ask why I bring up her name and her career, her exciting career, at a tech conference like Lyft. That's because Carla Bruni has become the First Lady of France because of a tech conference. First time that Carla Bruni ever met Nicolas Sarkozy was at a little tech summit that the President of France threw for French recording artists. President Sarkozy does not like to see French artists suffering from piracy losses, and he's especially irritated by internet zealots who declare that French music ought to be free when he knows perfectly well that somebody somewhere is paying for it. So President Sarkozy, therefore, has created a policy to civilize the internet from a French perspective. And the first order of operation in his plan is to repress peer-to-peer networks on French soil. And since artists, like Carla, and copyright holders, like Carla, and backbone operators, which Carla is not yet, they all hate peer-to-peer networks, and peer-to-peer networks have never given a dime to President Sarkozy's electoral campaign or anybody else. His scheme is to make himself the European equivalent of Steve Jobs. So, Monsieur and Madame Sarkozy are the products of an internet policy romance. Carla isn't here at Lyft. Carla has a whole lot of reasons to be here at Lyft. Carla Sarkozy is what futurists refer to as a black swan. A black swan is a historical event which is significant and important, but so far-fetched that it's unpredictable even in principle. The attack on the World Trade Center was a black swan. Even if you know that Al-Qaeda doesn't like crusaders, there was no sensible way to anticipate that. Similarly, even if you know that politicians often have girlfriends, you cannot know that one is suddenly going to become the Madame du Barry of a French digital renaissance. But black swans can be good as well as bad. Swans are beautiful creatures, they are. And Carla Sarkozy is gorgeous. She's a transnational European aristocrat who loves poetry, music, and philosophy. Sarkozy is like a politician who got a sour lemon and then made some lemonade, and then he married the heiress of an entire Italian lemon orchard. Carla took a bad situation, no Madame Sarkozy, and she turned it into a situation where there is a Madame Sarkozy who is extremely weird. With Carla on board, he's got more lemons than you or I can imagine. He's like a lemon mogul. And it's not like this was some pre-calculated master scheme, because no man who is thunderstruck by Carla Bruni is ever in command of events. But he has multiplied his options radically. Cecilia bitterly resented it, just because he sent her alone into a hostile terrorist country to rescue some hostages, which she did. Whereas Carla, by contrast, is clearly capable of anything. She is a charismatic, poetic, wealthy, sophisticated, profoundly promiscuous European aristocrat, completely untroubled by bourgeois morality. Now, a story like that practically writes itself. There isn't one journalist in this world who can't write a Carla Sarkozy story in his or her sleep, which is why you will certainly be inundated by recurring tidal waves of Carla Sarkozy stories. In Europe in 2008, these are two adventurers, radicals, a decadent aristocrat married to the self-made man, and now they're in power. They're simply the most interesting story there is. Okay, that given. And it is given, because you don't get any choice about a black swan. How does one get ahead of this? Well, this calls for some futurist scenario thinking. So let's delimit the possibilities, shall we? What really matters in this situation? What are the two most important driving forces? I'd say there are two: ambition and publicity. We've got one axis, which is ambition, Carla's ambition, because a politician is always ambitious. That's a given, that's not a variable. And the other axis, which is publicity. Carla and President Sarkozy are notorious. They cannot possibly turn the publicity faucet off. That is not within their power, but they can turn the faucet up. They cannot make the press go away, but they can feed it. And they've already both done that repeatedly and skillfully, either together or apart. So we know that this matters to them. So from these two axes, we can form a quadrant of future possibilities. The four possible future worlds in 2008 of Monsieur and Madame Sarkozy. There are four combinations: low ambition, high publicity; low ambition, low publicity; high ambition, low publicity; and the fourth and last possibility, high ambition and high publicity. That's all the two of them can do. They can do bold things loudly, or bold things quietly, or mild things loudly, or mild things quietly. When they're in bed together, talking over their strategy, weeping, chuckling, consoling each other, whatever newlyweds do, that's pretty much it. So what will happen in 2008? Well, we can't outguess this, but we can describe it. First scenario: low ambition, low publicity. This is the ends in tears scenario. Carla has never been married before. She's certainly never been a politician's wife. It's boring. The forces of conventionality overwhelm her. It's just too much for her. She retreats from the public scene. She's in depression. Cecilia was right about everything. Nicolas is too much for any woman to handle. He's full of himself. He's burning her out. The manic romance has switched over into a depression. Divorce looms. They try not to say anything about it. Another public divorce would be unthinkable. They go to earth. They really try to hide. It has ended in tears. Scenario number 2. High publicity, low ambition. We can call this one the first diva of France scenario. Carla is happy to be the First Lady of France. It's a big honor. Respectability goes to her head. At meetings of the UN, the G7, she supermodels French couture. She's in vogue in women's wear daily, but never in The Economist or in the New York Times. She records a new pop album. It sells pretty well. The French population becomes proud of her. They don't call her the Italian green-eyed witch anymore. Their First Lady is pretty and talented. She's a patroness of culture. She makes all the other First Ladies from all other countries look like potato sacks. What French citizen can't like that prospect? It's turned out pretty well as far as the population of France is concerned. The first diva of France scenario. Now, scenario number 3. Low publicity, high ambition. We can call this one the power behind the throne scenario. Carla has always had a taste for famous men in power. Now she's finally gotten one at the very top of the heap. She's tired of the model's catwalk. She only became a pop musician because she was bored. She was the mistress of musicians, and she saw how easy it was to lead that life. The Bruni-Sarkozy family, though, are aristocrats, and they're not feeble, inbred, weak aristocrats. They're European industrial aristocrats. People with factories, people who make rubber tires. Carla is already richer than Sarkozy is. She's 6 times richer than Sarkozy. Carla wants to make industrial policy. That was why she courted Sarkozy in the first place. He's a jittery, hyperactive politician in need of an intimate counselor he will trust without question. There will be his years as president. Then he retires and he takes over as the CEO of some major league recording company. Then they really cash in. They're Carla Incorporated. They're Carla SRL. Maybe a baby. While she's First Lady, then they'll have an industrial dynasty. The power behind the throne scenario. And then the final scenario, high publicity, high ambition. They say that in any proper set of 4 futurist scenarios, there are 3 that are the Goldilocks versions. You know that fairy tale, Goldilocks and the 3 bears? There's like 3 bowls of porridge. One is too hot, one is too cold, and then one bowl of porridge is just right. So there are commonly 4 futurist scenarios. One is too cold, and one is too hot, and one is just right. And then there's the 4th one, which is the weird one. And the weird one is commonly the most useful scenario because the future tends to be weird. High publicity, high ambition is the weird scenario. We can call this scenario Empress of Europe. Nicolas is busy making his friend, Tony Blair, into the first president of Europe right now. Not because he really likes Tony. Tony is a British leftist, and he speaks terrible French. But because Nicolas himself expects to have that job someday. After Tony Blair has turned that empty post into a real job with some power, then Sarkozy can become president of Europe. Tony is a gentleman. He will get out of the way. And as the kingmaker for the previous incumbent, not to mention being president of France, Sarkozy has a rather good shot at this job. Now, the last French leader who survived the divorce while in office was the Emperor Napoleon. And if you were a student of French history, you might notice that the outlines of contemporary Europe are similar to those of Napoleon's empire at its greatest extent. Yes, the emperor took too many risks. It ended in silence and exile for him, but at least he abolished the Holy Roman Empire and invented the Code Napoleon and rid Europe of a lot of annoying medieval clutter, which is clearly what Nicolas Sarkozy most wants to do. They call him the bling-bling president. The Emperor Napoleon didn't exactly lack for bling-bling. Glamour has its uses. Glamour can be a weapon. On the field of battle, the moral is to the material as 3 is to 1. So in this scenario, we see things coming out of imperial Europe, 21st century Europe, that we haven't seen out of Europe for maybe 200 or 300 years. We see world-sweeping, aggressive Carla Sarkozy charm offensives. She's a pop star with the power of the state behind her. She's bigger than Bono. She's bigger than the Rolling Stones. The two of them have cooked up a weird media, art, and culture intervention, which is meant to wake the French population from its slumbers. When Sarkozy says that he wants to lead a French Renaissance, he is in deadly earnest. And since it cannot be military and cannot be economic, it's pretty much got to be political and cultural. They're living in a hurricane of madness, as Carla puts it, in her poetic way. And they are methodically steering the hurricane. This star couple does not intend to merely conquer France. That would be too easy. Everybody else thinks the publicity firestorm will embarrass them, that they will have to sit down and shut up and stop bothering people with tabloid headlines, but no. In the Empress of Europe scenario, the fireborn are at home in fire. A supermodel and a statesman can never get enough publicity or enough power. They conquer France, they plan their assault on Europe, and you'll be lucky if they stop there. So, now we have our 4 future worlds. You don't have to feel surprised or offended by this advent any longer. It's not like you could predict the future. Carla and Nicolas, I could promise you they don't know the future any better than you do. But it's become a spectator sport. You can amuse yourself now placing odds on these scenarios. And right now, I myself would judge it about this way. Ends and tears, 40% probability. First diva, France, 15% probability. Power behind the throne, 10%. An Empress of Europe, I would give a whopping, optimistic, caffeinated 35%. Because I'm a journalist. And although I know failure is always most likely, fantastic success is a much better story. There are those who claim the two of them have already gone too far. The Muslims are offended. The Hindus are offended. The Pope was offended. Elderly French conservative Catholics are offended by their behavior. Even the British royal family, who aren't exactly noted for propriety in their romantic behaviors, seem a little at sea. Who cannot cheer on a couple who can do all that? If they get away with this, an entire future generation of political leaders in Europe and around the world will be liberated to have the same personal lives all of the rest of us do. In the 21st century, there aren't any major political figures who actually observe any Victorian sexual propriety. They just cynically exploit sexual values politics as a weapon against the population and against each other. You can ask any outed gay in America's Republican Party how well that works. That kind of tactic works, but it's evil. It's bad for us. Now, I wouldn't want to claim that Carla and Sarko are all that happens in 2008, even if they make themselves big news during that year. I can guarantee you that Carla has won herself a place in the history books. In 2028, journalists, historians will say Carla Bruni, and people will say, wow, that sounds so early 21st century. But Carla Bruni isn't the only black swan who graces our world. The internet was a black swan, too, in her younger days. The internet, tech industry, has gotten pretty big. Big enough so that Carla and Nicolas go to it. And they find each other there. And they get married. Instead of the industry going to Nicolas and Carla to politely ask them for political favors and some cultural content, The internet doesn't need political favors now because it can make or break politicians. And it is full of content, much of it swiped or involuntarily shared from the likes of Carla Bruni. Now, I don't have time up here to run a similar futurist scenario about the internet's adventures of 2008, but I could tell you stories. Really. I could tell you stories about the future. When you have a good story about futurity, you can smell it. You can smell it taking on shape. You'll never outguess the details. You never can. But the smell of futurity coming true, boy, that will get you out of bed in the morning. It's like coffee and bacon in another room. 90% of success, the way to survive this next year or any year, showing up. When you succeed in reaching the future, it means that you survive long enough to see it. You survive long enough to become it. The human being, you can become the future. You can embody it. You can live it. And the future can be guessed at, but life is best enjoyed. So enjoy your conference, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me.